This is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, a podcast and radio program presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. Most any contemporary musical style can trace its roots back to the blues. Time Signatures explores the blues and its musical connections with captivating interviews, lively discussions, and news from the world of the blues.
You know I'm crying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
And now, here he is, your host, Jim Ervin.
Baby, I'm home.
And baby, I am home. I'm actually recording from my home in Mason, Michigan. And we're taking a nice little road trip all the way out to the Hudson Valley of the state of New York. And my guest today is a guy that I'm really excited to talk to because I want to learn a little bit more about his music. He's very popular in New York City, started playing at the age of 10 years old, inspired by his highly musical family. Gideon King, it is a pleasure to have you on Time Signatures. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great and appreciative that you're taking the time to chat with me.
Well, you know, I'm always looking for people that, you know, can bring me something that's related to the blues in some form or fashion, because that's what Time Signatures is basically about. And having been exposed to some of your music and some of your video, I love the mix, the Steely Dan, the Earth, Wind and Fire, John Mayer, Stevie Wonder. I mean, it's all kind of just a blended, well, as I was reading here, a unique variety of fusion pop. And you truly do defy any specific genre, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, for me, this was sort of born out of like an inner conflict when I was a little kid where, you know, my brother was a prodigy piano player playing McCoy Tyner and Bill Evans and straight ahead modern jazz. And my sisters were listening to everything from Jimi Hendrix to, you know, Richie Havens to Neil Young to Stevie Ray Vaughan. And then my parents, of course, were from another generation and talking about classical music and how that was the only real music. And so when I encountered actually the blues too, but when I encountered Steely Dan and Pat Metheny and John Schofield, who of course is one of my best friends, first of all, and who I've, you know, recorded music with, but also a wonderful jazz and blues guitar player. You know, when I realized that it was sort of possible to mix a lot of different ingredients into the salad, is when I sort of felt, you know, psychologically freed from having to bind myself to any specific genre. And that's why, you know, that's why my music really is sort of funk, jazz, rock, whatever. It even has classical elements to it at times.
You do.
And for sure, there's a ton of blues hidden in there and sometimes not so hidden. So, you know, I'm a real product of different influences. And you know, I like it that way. I want to keep it that way.
Well, it's kind of cool because when I was listening to the links that John sent me from you, of course, you've got your release. We're going to be talking about that here in a few minutes. You've got your single that was just released, Turn Off the Sky. I really enjoyed the mix. But I want to talk about your earliest memories of music. What were the earliest memories, and what point did you absolutely know that you were destined to be a professional musician?
When I was like about 6, my brother, I would go to sleep in New York City with my head against a pretty shabbily constructed sheetrock wall. And on the other side of that wall was my brother's upright Baldwin piano. And Johnny, my brother, was pounding the holy shit out of that piano 24/7. And he was playing Bobby Timmons and he was playing Hank Mobley and Charlie Parker lines and Fats Waller and Earl Hines and Joplin. And so from a very young age, I had this kind of musical blood transfusion of a kind of atypical approach to music, which is jazz, by most people's standards, atypical, and is really wonderful because all these colors, musical colors, were being pumped into my head by my brother improvisationally, blues-wise, jazz-wise. I don't know that I knew that I would ultimately be a professional musician, but I knew then that I had met at least one of my true loves. And it was that mixture of math and spirit that is music. And so I just knew it. I could feel the math coming through the walls, the triads, the harmonies, the altered scale. We could go on forever. But I also felt the spirit. I felt the piano, rattling against the wall, and then the intensity of my brother. And my brother was an amazing, amazing musician, and really introduced me to the open architecture of music and that incredible blend of complexity and yet spirit and soul. And man, I just fell in love with it then, and then started doodling around on guitar after that, playing little chromaticisms, learning Jimi Hendrix stuff, learning a little Neil
Sure.
Young stuff, and Robert Cray or whoever, whatever, and started with the basics, pentatonic shapes and things like that, and then branched out to jazz and fingerstyle and even a little classical and all kinds of stuff. So that was when I really knew at a young age that I had found one of my true loves. Just as I knew, the first few times I played basketball, that I loved basketball, but that I kind of stunk at it. And so like I still play, okay,
Sure.
but but you won't see me playing any NBA basketball anytime soon.
Right on. Now, you formed Gideon King in the City blog back in 2015. And according to the notes
right
here,
on.
you quickly wrote and released the first CD entitled City Blog, which was a studio project. Talk about that process, man. That must have been kind of a release for you, was it not?
It was, and I had been, I took time off from music because I worked to try and make some money and sort of sustain myself and get civilized. But yeah, I mean, that project was the first earnest, somewhat awkward at times, well done, but also sort of meandering and sloppy expression of what I really wanted to be, which was a person a lot like Donald Fagen from Steely Dan, to be honest,
Sure.
who wrote lots of songs which would appeal to pop and jazz and classical musicians alike. And then I would bring in the best musical athletes to come and execute those songs, who are nice people and unbelievable musicians. And so that's what that was. I wrote all these songs staying up till 3 a.m. every night for 2 years. And then called in it was almost like a hyperbolic, exaggerated example of what I envisioned, in the sense that, I called everybody in on those albums. And we listen, those first couple albums had amazing musicians on them. I mean, just household names in jazz.
Sure.
So incredible musicians. And that helped the product and hurt the product in some ways. And so, that's what it was. It was this bursting at the seams of this vision that I had to create a more modern day collective centered on just a guy or a few people that write music. Again, hate to do this, but again, a lot like Steely Dan.
Yeah, well, no, that's okay. And so many musicians that I speak to talk about the early, their early attempts at coming up with their own music and forging their own style. And of course, everybody's got to find their own voice, but you really seem like you were on your way with this. And following City Blog, you came out with a couple of more CDs, Upscale Madhouse in 2018, Lady of a Thousand Stories, and Audience of One in 2019. But I wanted to talk about Love Not a bit, because that was in 2020, and it looked like you were on a hell of a roll, but then COVID hit. How did that affect you on a personal level, especially knowing the background that we've got already? And how did you deal with the shutdown?
You know what? I was disgusted by it. Let me, I don't want to be sort of political.
No,
It's
you're
not
okay.
A show about politics. But let me be honest. I was disgusted by the shutdown. I think we overreacted as a society. Don't get me wrong. I'm incredibly sympathetic to anybody who suffered from COVID. I had COVID a couple times, but I'm incredibly sympathetic to anybody who did suffer from COVID, and God knows anybody who died or perished from
Sure.
COVID. But I do think we overreacted, and we visited this incredible pain economically and sociologically on our society by shutting everything down. And it increased so many negative things, homelessness and joblessness. And I don't know that America has recovered. So I had kind of a counter COVID reaction where I said, well, great, if everything's shutting down, then I'm going to make as much music with as many musicians as possible. So yes, I released Love Not, which parenthetically kind of just reflects my true love of duets. Okay. I love duets. Like I'm a sucker for like, probably all your listeners are going to shut the show off right now, but I'm like a sucker for like Andy Gibb and Barbara Streisand duets, Guilty, and Sheryl Crow and Kid Rock and Fred Astaire duets. So that song Love Not reflected my love and respect for duets, and just the kind of earnest elemental connection that duets represent in music, two people sort of talking to each other through music and singing lyrics together. I love the energy of duets. So I wrote that. But yeah, getting back to COVID, I thought COVID was an incredible opportunity, given that there were no gigs and everything was shut down, to get musicians up to my studio and sit in that studio together and create as much music as humanly possible. So we pumped out a tune a month almost, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm talking soup to nuts, writing,
Sure.
producing, finishing, mixing, and sometimes more than that. And so we still have a backlog of, I don't know, 10, 15 tunes that are waiting to come out from that period that will just continue to come out. And I thought it was an incredible opportunity. And I was also just sort of like, man, let's do something productive and create something instead of just sitting in our sweatpants watching, Sean Hannity tell Rachel Maddow she's a jerk, and watching Rachel Maddow tell Sean Hannity he's a jerk, and everybody fighting over COVID. Let's just ignore this non-scientific garbage chatter and just get in and try and do something intelligent and creative. And you know what? It was fun and it was exciting and it was great for our band. It really solidified our band members and made GKCB go from Gideon King and City Blog go from a really widespread collective of musicians to a more focused group of people that really form our band. So listen, COVID was horrible, and I wouldn't want the United States to go through that again.
No.
But in trying to get lemonade out of lemons, that's what we did.
You're killing my questions here because you're just walking right through and you're hitting all the high points. And that's
sorry, man.
No. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Like I said, I've done my homework, but as a person who is, I'm very much an extrovert, love meeting people, love talking to people. I've been home working for 3.5 years now. I'm still very extroverted, but I'm a little less so than I was.
Right.
So that did affect me on that level, but it sounds like all it really did for you is just get the engine going more. Did it not?
It truly did. And it was a chance for people to stop and freeze for a year or two and reflect and create. As I wrote in my song Dealing, I mean, you could sit around and just sort of drink and fall apart. Or you could really say like, wait, this is a chance for my brain to truly have the time to produce and to reflect. And there's no excuse, but if you're a carpenter, you should be coming up with some new cabinets. If you're a, if you're a surfer, wax your surfboard. If you're a songwriter, get some songs done, because you have the time. And, also I was really excited to give all these musicians who weren't playing gigs work. And it was nice to just sort of get together everybody and give a lot of musicians work during a period where there wasn't any work. And so, it really did start our engines, and it allowed us to march toward the goal for me of what I think it is to be a musician, which is you should have a long catalog of music, or a large catalog of music, which people can dive into. Right. I'm not an Instagram musician, right? Like I don't want to be cool on Instagram. I want to, when we get off the phone,
Sure.
If you're so inclined, I want you to say, hey, I'm going to spend 2 hours on Spotify listening to this band. And so, that for me is what it is to be a band, to have a big catalog. And so, you're absolutely right. COVID revved up that engine for damn sure.
Absolutely. You are listening to Time Signatures with Jim Ervin. My guest today is Gideon King. His group is Gideon King and City Blog. And we are having a wonderful discussion with him today, talking about his music, his influences, and the ties to the blues. Gideon, I have to ask you, what do you feel is the best song you've written and released, or maybe haven't not released yet, and why?
Oh man, one song, one
Can
song.
you pick just
You,
one?
here's the thing. You might as well have a mother on your show and ask her which of her kids is her favorite kid. It's really
That's
like
fair.
that's hard for me. But if I'm gonna answer the question, and I'm gonna say Splinters, the extended version of Splinters, which may or may not be on Spotify yet, because it blends so many of the things that I love about music, Pat Metheny style,
Sure.
voice textures, lyrics, chords, a funk groove, almost like something you'd hear from a John Scofield album or a Steely Dan album. So that's the one I'm most musically proud of. The one that may be the most beautiful expression, crazy enough, isn't released yet. And it's a version, almost a Radiohead-like version of the old show tune, as insane as that sounds, "Send in the Clowns." And we put it like like a sort of odd meter funk beat on that.
Sure.
And Caleb Hawley just delivered this incredible vocal. But dude, I also love Dealing and Winter Soldier and Love Not, and we got so much music out there. What You Gonna Do? So those are all close. Those are all close seconds. But every once in a while, you get in the studio, Jim, and what you actually envisioned actually happens. And you feel like it was uncompromisingly what you envisioned. And then Splinters was that, to be honest.
Yeah, and I want to kind of springboard into that if I can for just a minute, because Splinters, the EP is going to be released. Talk a little bit about that effort and what you've got in the EP. If there's anything that stands out to you that you really, really want to talk about, let's hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's 5 songs, one cover, which we just released, which is an old Keane cover called "Somewhere Only We Know," which is a wonderful tune. And there's some funk in there, there's some fusion, there's some straight out pop. Oh, wait, it's 6 songs. We did add one. I apologize.
Okay.
And I think it's the most excellently recorded and produced stuff we have done. It's a little more pop than usual, although there's definitely some fusion in there.
Mm-hmm.
Turn Off the Sky is part of that EP that got good reception with editorial playlists on Spotify. So that was really cool. And so just really feel that the band came together, collaborated, and produced something that is a reflection of all the different sort of cross currents in this band. And love the lyric, proud of the lyrics, proud of the songs, and really happy with the production. Listen, I guess, Jim, every artist says, "Oh, geez, this is our best work yet," right? Like, what am I going to say to you? This is the worst we ever put out? No, but hey, I'm going to say it too. I think this is the best work we've done.
Well, I think that, listening to, because I have spent some time listening to the EP, I think you're spot on with the pop. There's quite a bit of a flavor of pop in it. But I like it's hard for me to explain. It's like a free spirit, just a really good time when you're listening to this EP. It's hard not to smile and have a good time when you're listening to it.
Yeah, I mean, what's cool about my band is that if you talk to my piano player, this guy loves pop music. He can play the heck out of the blues. He is a good jazz musician, and he's also a wonderful classical musician. So all I need to do is sort of like take the match to the fire pit and just throw it in. And between all these musicians, like my drummer Jake and Christian, we have 2 drummers really. We play with percussion and drums. These are all they're such skilled musicians that once you get the spark going, the varied musical influences in the band leach to the surface. And I will, not that I'm being critical of other people, but sometimes you meet people, right? And you say, well, what are your influences? And they say, oh, I'm really influenced by this, that, the other thing, A, B, C, D, E, F. But, when you really get to know them, they don't really know that much about different types of music. And, people love to say, because it sounds kind of hip and varied and diverse, to say, well, my stuff is influenced by soul, pop, classical music, this, that. But here's the thing. In this band, it really is. It
That's
really is. It's the real thing. My bass player is a great straight ahead jazz bass player. He's also a ridiculous funk bass player. Loves the blues. I love the blues. I was up till 3:15 a.m. last night playing blues in 12 keys. Like just so I guess what I would say is this EP, it is a good time if you consider a good time drawing from these different musical worlds. Because man, I love Stevie Ray
right on.
and you know and Wayne Krantz as much as I love Bach and as much as I love Neil Young, as much as I love Dave Mason's album, as much as I love Kingfish, like meaning I really love all this stuff and I listen to
Sure.
it all the time. I love Adele, man. I love Adele. So
Right.
like, maybe it's not cool to say, you love Miley Cyrus if if you're supposed to be a serious music, but you know what? Her song Jaded's a great freaking song.
Uh-huh.
So like, I love all this stuff, and it all draws from these elemental things that have been around since I don't know 1100 BC. So and I think truly that unlike many, we are differentiated in that we really are drawing from a ridiculously diverse pool of musical languages, if you want to say it that way.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, I'm having a blast sitting here because you and I can tell musically are kindred spirits because
I'm sure we are.
I'm sitting here smiling as you're talking about this big blend of music that you enjoy and listen to. And a lot of my friends are like, no, I like the classic rock, man. Screw the blues and this and that. No, I get into a point or get into a mood or get into whatever you want to call it, where I got to have my blues or I got to have my classic rock or I got to have my country or like you said, even classical. There's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, and then the thing is, your show is somewhat centered around the blues, and
we are.
If you have time, I mean, I can express what I think is so wonderful about the blues to you if you're interested.
By all means, sure.
I mean, the thing is, if you sit down, even if you just turn on a cheesy backing track on, you just Google, blues and B flat backing track, so you have something to play over while you're, with your guitar. Here's the thing about blues. First of all, when people say blues, they think of B.B. King, they think of Stevie Ray, but it's so much deeper than that. And there's jazz blues, which it just can be conceptualized as a series of 2-5-1s. But even if you just take the core one chord of a blues, say you're an A and you're playing over, A dominant, like there are 50 billion ways that you can play over that A dominant. Man, you can play altered. You can do diminished stuff. You can play all the triads inside the Mixolydian scale. You can play all the triads inside the diminished scale, which is associated with A dominant. You can come up with patterns. And so, like, when I think of the blues, I think, of course, of, little B.B. King vibe. I also think of this exploding mathematical world just over the one chord. And then substituting, imagining all the chords and all the crazy stuff that can happen while going to the fourth chord, modulating to three keys, cycling through three keys as you get to the four chord D dominant. And so when I think of the blues, I don't just think of, Chuck Berry or B.B. King or the big obvious names. What I think of is this ever expanding harmonic explosion, frankly, of ideas that, to be honest with you, Stevie Ray or Jimmy or whoever didn't even exploit. And that's why I would always encourage your listeners or anybody to sit one day in a room and close your door and listen to John Scofield play, because in many ways he's one of the bluesiest son of a guns who's ever played guitar, and I think he's the greatest blues guitarist who's ever lived. Okay.
Wow.
And that's because he not only is soulful, and he not only can play the out of simple soulful blues when he's on the stage with Government Mule or John Mayer or whoever, or whoever he's touring with, Phil Lesh, but he also can blow through the chord changes like a bebop player and mix the two and exploit the blues for what it really is, which is an unbelievably rich harmonic bedrock for doing all kinds of stuff. When people say to me, I love the blues, I'm like, oh, cool, who do you love? and I just wait for them to rattle off the 5 big names. You know what I mean? and I think to myself, what, man, if you could just like listen to a little Cannonball Adderley, or just listen to Herbie Hancock play the blues in 1983, or Michael Brecker, and then I think like this blues structure is one of the most rich. I don't even know what to call it. It's an endless vehicle for exploration. Even if it's just a 4-bar blues. I mean, one day we'll do another podcast, and I'll just, I'll play, and we'll just talk about all the crazy things that can happen harmonically. And man, for me, that's what the blues is. It's this wide open place to roam.
I'll tell you what, we're going to take a break right here. My guest is Gideon King of Gideon King and City Blog. And if you have enjoyed the conversation half as much as I have, I've got good news for you. We're going to continue the discussion in our next episode. For now, thank you for listening. And until next time, let's keep on keeping the blues alive.
This has been Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. For more information on cabs, visit capitalareablues.org. You can find this episode and past episodes at lcconnect.org. The Time Signatures theme song, Michigan Roads, is used by permission and was written by Root Doctor, featuring Freddie Cunningham.
You know I'm trying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
Until next time, keep on keeping the blues alive.